For out of the night of worry and terror, out of the darkness of false ideals and fallacious standards, out of the gloom of superficial pessimism and despairing hope, out of the bleak and forbidding night of the present, there will be light. After the darkness will come the dawn. These are the words that Rabbi Maurice Eisendrath used to conclude his Erev Rosh Hashanah sermon 87 years ago from this pulpit's Bond Street location. In his poetic, prophetic style, he revealed his faith that at the end of this bitterly cold and all too long night would come the dawn. And here we are, 87 years later, a world war and a Cold War have passed. The decimation of our people in the Shoah and our blessedly complicated political sovereignty in the state of Israel. It is 5778, and we are still waiting for that great moment, that public celebration of life and light, when the second horn of the ram caught in the thicket next to Isaac's bound body will be blown. That moment when, through the cloud of sexism, racism, personal envy and enmity, a clearing will appear, and a light supernal will fill our world. Is now that moment? Are we even on that path? Last year, for much of 57-77 to be honest, I thought that we were on the way. We had progress in politics to match that in science. We had a world signed on to the Paris Climate Accord. When asked about progress, because it's 2016, used to feel like an appropriate response. And now, on this Rosh Hashanah, 5778, I know I am not alone in fearing a slow creep back to the lurking shade. I was speaking to one of my friends recently, Rabbi Ari Lorge, when he shared his experience on the subway on his morning commute to Central Synagogue in New York. He had opened his phone to do some reading, and up popped the daily news briefing. Here it is from July 11th. 5 things for your Tuesday: Russia probe, military plane crash, Qatar, healthcare, and mass extinction. On that list, a search for optimism and hope is in vain. For fear, anger, and righteous indignation, one could click on healthcare. But on this list, well, who could help but click on the last one, mass extinction? This cheery article, which Rabbi Lord spent his commute reading through, was about how climate change and human choices are creating mass extinction events for animals all around the world. According to this article, when my youngest daughter is 22, elephants may only survive in captivity, in zoos, and many other species are worse off. What a cheery way to start the day. So much for that optimism. The dawn of a more ideal world is just around the corner. As an American, this has been a tough year. I've been challenged by racist and anti-immigration rhetoric, which propelled both Donald Trump and Brexit to success. I have been challenged by Klan members and neo-Nazis who marched through the streets and intimidated worshipers at our sister congregations this past summer, all without the unequivocal condemnation that things that are evil deserve. Today, as the United States tries to exit from the Paris Climate Agreement, and other congregations are struggling after the hurricanes to hold their High Holy Day services. Today, in the World Union of Progressive Judaism, our body of Reformed synagogues around the world, many leaders in Europe report anxiety over the political rise of isolationism and anti-immigration sentiments in their countries. All of this has made me question the direction we are moving in, as the setting sun moves us from 5777 to 5778, as we move from, in Hebrew, Tish Az, a year of strength. What do we move towards? The dawn? Rabbi Eisendrath was alive at a time when one of the greatest influences on Jewish theology was modernism, an idea that progress for the individual and for society was inevitable. Rooted in our willingness to experiment and learn, we couldn't help but create a better world. The boom of progress, which had been reducing mortality since the Industrial Revolution, was in full swing, and our ability to conquer the natural world around us through scientific knowledge and technology was continuing unabated. Even in the midst of the Great Depression, a belief in the ever-improving future gave hope. In my reading of Rabbi Eisendrath, I would say that he is a devout modernist and a devout Jew. Thus, in part, the construction of this beautiful building, seating over 1,000 for a congregation of a few hundred, which he was proud to say used the most modern of building materials and the most modern of construction techniques available at the time. The most famous expression of this sentiment, this faith in the inevitability of progress, this fervent religious hope for the future, was actually spoken from this bema, which Rabbi Eisendrath built, and by none other than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He, on an invitation from our Temple Brotherhood, proclaimed, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Now, as many of you who are learned in art and the social sciences know, as a society, we've actually moved away from much of modernism because of its focus on the individual instead of the community. Because modernism is a movement anchored in an empire-building sense of progress, ignoring the perspectives of minority communities and disadvantaged populations. And with this has come a clouding of even the core idea of progress. Progress for who? At what cost? Modernism was not as concerned with gender equality, multiculturalism, and environmentalism as we are today. Now there is a group of thinkers and authors called the New Optimists, who still see progress in the world, and in the face of the blips of war and terror and evil, still feel that history has no choice but to keep on arcing towards justice. Their works, with titles like The Better Angels of Our Nature, The Moral Arc, and Progress, point out that a large majority of us, when surveyed, think the world is sliding downhill, which, on a global scale of human living, is just demonstrably not true. Violence and human-caused suffering are at an all-time low. Global poverty has dropped below 10%. Global infectious diseases, including leprosy, are in massive retreat. Child mortality is massively down. They ask, how can we not see that when we just continued going the way we're going, that we are arcing quickly towards a day when the sun will peek through the clouds for a greater tomorrow? As one of the New Optimists remarks, optimism, after all, means more than just believing that things aren't as bad as you imagined. It means having justified confidence that they will be getting better quickly. Yet, there is a point when justified confidence is just fantasy. According to one critic, this pure optimism seems to describe a world in which human agency doesn't seem to matter, because there are these evolved forces that are moving us in the right direction, but human agency still does matter. Human beings still have the capacity to mess it all up, and it may be that our capacity to mess it up is growing. If anything, this is the lesson of the past year. Human agency still matters. As Jews, our tradition is clear. Optimism and hope are not enough. On Yom Kippur, just before the Yizkor service, here at Holy Blossom Temple, we will read these words from the prophet Ezekiel. Then God said to me, Son of man, these bones are the house of Israel. And the house of Israel are saying, our bones are dried up, and Avda Tikvatenu, our hope is lost. And God replies, therefore give them prophecy, speak to them. And I did, and then they moved. Not that God makes them move, but rather that they moved. The prophet gives the people hope, but then not by an outside force, but by effort, the people move. Rabbi Splansky taught this past Shabbat this same message in a different way, discussing the difference between fantasy, pure optimism, and faith. She says, fantasy and faith may even be exact opposites. Fantasy is fooling yourself into believing that what is isn't, and what isn't is. Faith is knowing what is, seeing it, understanding it, claiming it, and committing yourself to take what is with you as you rise above and beyond it. As Jews, we must have faith, we must have hope, we must have optimism, but our optimism is different, because for us, hope requires human action. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said this as a statement of faith, a religious statement. He spoke of it in the context of protest against evil. He spoke those words with the implication that it takes us to bend the arc. Our Rabbi Eisendrath, who marched with Dr. King, knew that it was us, individually, but especially through our strength as a community, we who keep hope alive, we who cause that dawn to break through. Rabbi Eisendrath believed in a better day, not because he was a foolish optimist, a hopeful dreamer, but because he was a faithful Jew who had faith that we as a congregation can bring that light into a darkened world. These High Holy Days, some of us will make resolutions. Good. This is what I ask of you, to make this resolution different than the ones you make around the secular New Year. To make this a Jewish resolution, an action which brings more hope, which actualizes hope in our world. Resolve to take an action which will bring light and life to others, to volunteer, or to protest, or to donate for whatever cause you hold dear. Even if it doesn't fix the whole world, it can help one person, or 2 or 3 people, that important little bit, to bring more light and more hope to their lives. For then, out of the night of worry and terror, out of the darkness of false ideals and fallacious standards, out of the gloom of superficial pessimism and despairing hope, out of the bleak and forbidding night of the present, there will be light. After the darkness will come the dawn. Shana Tova.